Too little has been said about how the University of Pittsburgh impinged with the NAACP and Catholic services. Uh, the persona that I reacted against and thereby extruded for the Crow Cag Reduce the Corona Organ, John Schulman, what Tom Gordon called their godsend, which was a letter to Leslie Katz. Um, Steve Langer said, for someone who puts peace and flowers on his envelope, you sure sound like Attila the Hun. In other words, how they got the tea kettle to go up, how they created the persona of um, Jimmy Jekyll and Kevin Hyde of Two Virgins Israelite. In other words, how the American pacifists resorted to the nuclear weapon. In other words, how little Jimmy Queerball, who wouldn't fight back against armed guerrillas, turned into the jealous possessive that they decided to categorize by detonating an implanted neuroplasm. What sort of forces were impinging on the persona's experience? What was so amusing Claire and Salt Chunk Mary? What sort of tribe was Matt Marcus really cultivating when from Mr. Rogers' neighborhood he burned two girls' arms gangrenous with a poker from a fireplace? What did the feminazis mean by loving the thunder and heat? I'll read to you from Veiled Sentiments. It's about a Bedouin, the ethical values of a Bedouin, honor and poetry in a Bedouin society. Related to strength are qualities of toughness. Admired men were often described as difficult or tough, large in stature and physically strong. Such men assert their will. Women claim, for instance, that real men control all their dependents and beat their wives when the wives do stupid things. One woman, whose daughter was about to marry one of the most respected men in the camp, said, "My daughter wants a man whose eyes are open, not someone nice. Girls want someone who will drive them crazy. My daughter doesn't want to be with someone she can push around, so she can come and go as she pleases. No, she wants someone who will order her around." Although such her remarks about women's desires must be taken with a grain of salt, since they were intended to show me and presumably all the people to whom I would convey her words what a wonderful and compliant bride her daughter would make, they nevertheless indicate what she believed men wanted to hear about themselves. In general, women share the men's idealization of the assertive person and the view that such people were the source of order in the community and household. However, there are limits on how much a man should assert his will. Men and women always condemn the excesses of a harsh or volatile husband. Women privately appreciate a certain amount of kindness in a man. So, in other words, I went on to read the entire thing so you wouldn't accuse me of cherry picking. I read the entire paragraph in this book. So, in other words, supposedly very playfully, Hypatia Feminist Philosophy Journal engaged the neuroplasm in a ongoing conversation about what women really want and impinged this conversation on years and years of extreme violent brutality towards a deaf person, unprovoked, slaughtering blows to the head, and wired in a laugh that you are rejected because you are not assertive enough, because what women really want is what you are supposed to take with a grain of salt. So, and he wraps it up by saying, we take it with a grain of salt because we don't want to be found out for what we did to Jim Queerball. So we take it with a grain of salt. In other words, we plant this idea and plant this idea and plant this idea and demonstrate its necessity and its acceptance as a household. It wouldn't have been right, they said. And I disagreed with them, so I'm a queer bait. That's the way they want. We don't want history. We don't want investigators. We don't want Omar or the squad if they weren't involved, which is who knows. We don't want Zappa to be found out for what he was impinging and drilling into the psyche of the implant, who was putting flowers in the rifle and saying, "No, I'm looking for a woman who accepts me for who I am, who will stand with me and be good to me and understand how complicated the situation is." They wanted people to gyrate and get away with and poison and brutalize and mock and war game, and then say, "Oh, but take it with a grain of salt, take it light." And they were licky chops. They were making cinema porn. They were doing like this. They were obsessed with the queer bait swan, so they could say that AIDS was poetic justice. And they walked away because they said, "Take it with a grain of salt."